The lawnmower going on in the background, so I'm going to try to read a little bit more loudly. The horror began on November 13th, 1974, when Ronald DeFeo slaughtered 6 members of his family. All of the bodies were found face down in their beds at 112 Ocean Avenue. On December 18th, 1975, George and Kathy purchased the house, market value in 1974 of about $125,000, for a very reasonable $80,000. Father Ralph Pecoraro was brought in to offer a house blessing. Let's described him as an extraordinary man who spoke 9 languages and held an Oxford law degree. He went from room to room and said prayers in each room using holy water. He was a bit uncomfortable in the upstairs back bedroom. It was like he wanted to leave. On an episode appropriately entitled In Search of the Amityville Horror on Alan Landsberg's old In Search of television program, the production crew arranged a silhouetted sequence with the priest who spoke candidly in a rare interview. I was blessing the sewing, and it didn't account for that kind of coldness. I was also sprinkling. Oops, what happened there? Let's go back up. I was blessing the sewing room, and it didn't make sense. It was cold in there. It was a lovely day out, and it was winter, yes, but it didn't account for that kind of coldness. I was also sprinkling holy water and heard a rather deep voice behind me saying, "Get out." It seemed so directed toward me that I was really quite startled. At one point, I felt a slap on the face. I felt somebody slap me, and there was nobody there. The priest claimed that blisters appeared on his hands after the blessing. He commented that he went to the door, but the physician couldn't explain the wounds. He thought it might be caused by anxiety, and that's feasible, but I don't think I'm given over to psychosomatic responses. This blessing seemed to trigger or uncover the demonic nature of the home. George Lutz recalled that during the last week they were living in the house, they endured nightly occurrences of noises and foul odors. Here's an illustration. This photograph was taken inside a haunted house. In the top right corner of the image, a bright spirit can be seen reaching up toward the chandelier. Touched from behind by some unseen person. The lights would flicker, but they would not go out, he said. He would often wake up to a strange musical sound like musicians tuning up downstairs. While many regard the Amityville case as a hoax, others argue over the real case versus the Hollywood version. In June 1979, American International Pictures conducted lie detector tests on George and Kathy Lutz. They both passed. Also, back in 1977, Charles R. McQuiston, an acknowledged expert of the psychological stress evaluator, subjected a tape-recorded interview with Kathleen Lutz to the machine and concluded she was being truthful. "I'm convinced that this woman is telling the truth, or what she believes to be the truth," said McQuiston. "There are no deceptive traces in her voice when she talks about turning into an old hag. She really lived those horrible things, and she believes in what she is recounting." Kathleen Lutz, The Amityville Horror, Our 28 Days of Horror in House Terrorized by Evil Spirits, National Enquirer, December 13th, 1977. Hollywood over-dramatized the case in many ways. The Amityville Horror, 1979. Among a number of embellishments, the walls really didn't ooze strange substances. The truth, according to Lutz, was that it was the keyholes from the old-style doors that emitted some strange substance. "We had drips that got longer and longer," he said. "The mysterious drippings were black, almost like epoxy, and the longer we were in the house, the longer the drips came out of certain keyholes on the second and third floors. Large numbers of flies did form against the sewing room window. Flies were always there. They didn't go away," said Lutz. "The dog was scared to enter that room." The phenomena seemed to escalate until the night before they left. It was then that a fever pitch of paranormal events drove the Lutzes away. That night, Kathy had levitated and moved away from me on the bed, Lutz said. Kathy was asleep as she lifted off the bed and went towards the wall, away from me. This is after she had turned into an old crone, really ugly old woman that literally took hours and hours for it to go away. Later, she transformed again after we moved out of the house and moved in with her mom. Many researchers investigated the home. Ed and Lorraine Warren, the well-known ghost researchers and demonologists, brought psychic, sensitive Mary Pascarella to the Amityville house. Recalling her visit to the Lutz home, Mary said that the couple were impeccably clean and the house was absolutely gorgeous. Continuing with her recollection, the sensitive commented that what the Lutz family lost, they'll never be able to replace. The reality is that there had to be something that drove them away. Here's another illustration of paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren. Mary Pascarella said that when she was upstairs in the house, she had felt ill and tired and wanted to lie down and rest for a minute. She began to say her prayers, and as she was saying the Our Father, she looked out of the bedroom door, and there was a group of figures standing outside of the door, saying the Our Father backwards. I took the holy water and threw it outside to the figures. I took the cross and I raised the cross and I said, God is with me, and I threw it at the figures, and like water on a fire, I heard this hissing sound. Mary was deeply affected by her experience, while many critics have attacked the case largely due to the discrepancies and dramatic license taken in the movie. She went on to record on the September 15th, 1979 Brian Dow radio show, WTIC, Hartford, Connecticut, to defend the case. You are dealing with something that is invisible and can't be seen, and you are dealing in this case with something that is very malevolent. I've never really dealt with anything on that level. When appearing on the Art Bell show, Mary Pascarella added, there was a force or an energy in that house. The house is deceptive. It will take an innocent person and take hold of them. The energy in that house remains. It may take 100 years, but it will implode again. That house is purely evil. On a December 3rd, 1997 interview with Art Bell, Father Malachi Martin, who served as an advisor to two popes and was a best-selling author and expert on exorcism, said of the house in Amityville, I've been to it. The Amity horror was really a horror. It really was. It was real. It was generally gruesome and real, and it was very unpleasant. When asked if the force was still in the home, Father Martin responded, I'd be inclined to think that it is there because it was never properly cleansed. Roxanne South Kaplan and her husband, the late Stephen Kaplan, challenged the validity of the case and published a debunking work, The Amityville Horror Conspiracy. They noted changes in details from the hardcover version of the events to the paperback version. Kaplan took issue with Ed and Lorraine Warren in high-spirited debates on various talk shows and media outlets. The Warrens maintained that the case was an authentic manifestation of diabolical infestation. Their investigation produced paranormal photographs, including a still of a boy with glowing eyes near the staircase. Through lawyer battles and all-out debates, the case has roared on for nearly 30 years, and it has taken its toll on the participants. The Lutzes are divorced, and George lives in Las Vegas. Kathleen Lutz is currently in poor health and often needs oxygen to aid her breathing. Jay Anson, who authored the best-selling book The Amityville Horror, had a history of heart problems and died of a heart attack a couple of years after the book was published. George Lutz still speaks fondly of Kathy Each of us were affected in a different way, and Kathy was damaged in a different way than I was, said Lutz. I think that for her, in so many ways, it was much harder for her to recover over the years and be able to give it some distance. Both Kathy and George feel sympathy for Ronald DeFeo, who is serving a 25-year to life sentence at Greenhaven, Connecticut Correctional Facility in Dutchess County, New York. There has never been any doubt after living in that house that a sane person doesn't do this to his family. There's no doubt in our mind that he, DeFeo, was influenced by that house and that he was controlled, at least for a point. The awareness of that was so horrible that he couldn't live with it or realize it himself. Without extreme long-term psychiatric care, there's no hope of redemption of any kind in his life. The famous house was bought by Barbara and Jim Cromarties in 1977, who lived in it for years without incident. In 1997, they sold it to a buyer for $310,000, about half its market value. Shelby Luge, Real Life Housewives of Horror, National Globe, November 13th, 1999. The Cromarties. Sorry, I was. The Cromarties were adamant that there was nothing unusual about um, the home, and that the only horror was that it was that created by scores of annoying curiosity seekers. The entire Thanksgiving 1977 weekend, we were never alone. Thanksgiving Day, we had 30 people here for dinner, and we had at least 300 people outside. I'm not exaggerating, all at once, but there would be a service. We had hundreds of people out there. Dennis Hevesy, haunted by a horror story, Newsdays magazine for Long Island, September 17th, 1978. The Amityville horror case has reached legendary status in the annals of paranormal history. It has infuriated, frightened, frustrated, and antagonized nearly everyone involved, and the controversy rages on. Investigating ghosts and haunting phenomena. Dale Cogsmark, president of the Ghost Research Society in Oaklawn, Illinois, has been actively investigating haunting and paranormal phenomena since 1975. He has conducted on-site investigations of ghost lights, haunted houses, cemeteries, Native American burial grounds, murder sites, churches, and sacred sites. He appears regularly on numerous radio and television programs, and information about his research has been featured in more than 25 books. Kaczmarek is the editor of Ghost Trackers newsletter and the author of Windy City Ghosts, Windy City Ghosts 2, A Field Guide to Spirit Photography, Glossary of Occult Terms, The Creator, Chicagoland and Northwest Indiana Psychic Directory, and many other books. Through the research, study, and investigation that he has completed, as well as through the continuing analysis of those investigations, Kaczmarek hopes to prove the existence of ghosts and life after death. Whether I am investigating ghosts, hauntings, poltergeists, or any other form of the paranormal or supernatural, I always will follow the same guidelines and procedures to lead me to the end result or conclusion of an investigation, Kaczmarek said. Listed below are the steps that Kaczmarek follows in investigating ghosts and haunting phenomena. 1. When a case or person is called to my attention, the first step is to interview that person over the telephone and try to get all the relevant information concerning the house that can be obtained. We use a regular form that is filled out, and no questions are asked of the individual that might lead them to stretch the story out of proportion. Only general questions are asked at the conclusion of the telephone conversation, or those questions that are meant to clarify certain information already given. 2. Once that information is compiled, I personally sit down with professional psychics or clairvoyants with whom I frequently work to go over the information and telephone interview bit by bit to try to make some sort of determination of what might be going on prior to our arrival on the scene. This is how we are able to screen our cases, and such a procedure also gives the psychic that I have chosen the opportunity of asking questions of his or her own that I later pose to the client. We are careful not to form any concluding opinions at this point, but we do make additional notes of areas within the case that we will keep an eye on. 3. The next step is to call the client and tell him or her what we feel may be going on and set up a time when we might visit the house. I then tell the client to keep a diary of any strange or unusual events that may happen before our arrival date. It is important for the following data to be included in that diary: date, time, which room, type of event, who was present or witness to the phenomena, the duration of the event, and a description of the event in the greatest detail. One of the things that we would be looking for in the above mentioned diary are patterns that might begin to form. Over the years, we have discovered that most hauntings do have some kind of pattern or string of events. 4. Prior to arriving at the location, I would pack the necessary equipment that I feel would be instrumental in solving the mystery of the event. This might include, but not be limited to, 35mm SLR cameras on tripods with cable releases that would be loaded with two different kinds of film. One would have a black and white infrared film pushed to 400 ASA, and the other would have a black and white high speed print film to be used as a control film. Simultaneous pictures would be attempted and later compared for possible anomalies. Other equipment would include portable voice activated tape recorders, video cameras, cathode ray magnetometers, spectrographs, microwave detection devices, negative ion detectors, infrared viewing devices, Gauss meters, Geiger counters, as well as Instamatic SX70 cameras. 5. Upon our arrival at the location, we would first check with the diary our client has been keeping for further entries into the casebook. Then we would begin a slow walk around the location with a psychic or clairvoyant and with various forms of electronic equipment to see exactly what could be picked up. Pictures are taken randomly or at places the psychic designates as advantageous. Photographs are taken with both cameras, and the tape recorder is constantly going, recording the psychic's impressions and or feelings. 6. If any spirit or entity is contacted through the psychic, either telepathically or clairvoyantly, communication is attempted in an effort to determine why the spirit remains earthbound. The spirit is then convinced to move on through its own accord or with the help of the psychic. Since most spirits do not realize that they have passed over, that's usually all that is required to get the spirit to leave. We do not employ the use of Ouija boards, automatic writing, seances, or exorcisms, since we feel that these are almost always unnecessary and are extremely dangerous if not done properly. 7. After the film is returned from the laboratory, it is compared side by side with the infrared film. Many times, strange images are seen, including strange shadows, anomalous lights, energy balls or streaks, and even faces, forms, and figures. If it is a natural image, then it should show up on both films. If, however, the image only appears on the infrared film, we can assume that it is a supernatural event and invisible to the naked eye. Infrared film is sensitive to a narrow band between 7 to 1200 nanometers. 1 nanometer equals 1 billionth of a meter. 8. Besides the scientific and psychic investigations, additional research is done on the house and area in which it is built to determine the past history in general and such specifics as what originally was on the location, the former owners, and any previous unusual or traumatic events or deaths. In this way, an overall view can be put together and a profile can be drawn up and documented. We do not normally charge for the investigation. However, certain travel charges and cost of film and development are usually requested to help defray costs and to keep this valuable service going. 9. Additional follow-up calls and or visits are made if necessary to assume maximum efficiency and eventual resolution of the problem. While most events can be alleviated within a weekend, some hauntings have been known to go on for years. We absolutely guarantee the anonymity and confidentiality of all of our clients. The only people allowed to release such information are the client themselves.